sometimes when you feel like you are completely lost as a player, that is right where you need to be in order to find the next path forward. What's up, everyone? This week, we are talking about something that is a difficult subject for us as brass players, maybe even a little controversial sometimes. Today, we are talking about embouchure changes. So I usually try to keep things on this channel more centered around jazz and improvisation. That's where I feel like I, as sort of a teacher and pedagogue, have a perspective. I really tend to shy away from a ton of brass stuff because, in all honesty, I don't think I'm a very good brass player. Actually, getting the trombone to work in a sort of efficient and happening way is one of my biggest weaknesses as a player. However, over the last couple months, I have actually been going through an embouchure change myself. This is the first time in my playing career where I have ever undertaken this process, so I thought it might be insightful for some of you watching just to find out a little bit about my process and how I went about doing this. So before we jump into the weeds of why I decided to undertake an embouchure change, you got to come to terms with that doing so and going through this process won't inherently fix your problems as a brass player. The things that are challenging for us, maybe playing in the upper register, maybe playing across the range of the horn, playing fast, playing complicated music, all that stuff is still going to be there, even on the other side of this process. And in fact, you may actually even find that there are new challenges once you go through an embouchure change. Even with all of these considerations, the reason that I undertook this a few months ago is I actually injured my lip pretty significantly. In the spring, early summer of 2024, I just had a really busy couple of months playing. And I am someone who's always sort of struggled, particularly with my skin. I think I just have relatively sensitive skin. You know, I play on a gold mouthpiece. I don't know if I have the allergy that some people talk about with silver mouthpieces. But my skin can really become a problem. I tend to play with a little too much pressure, especially centered around the right upper lip. And so after this long period of relatively intensive playing, my skin was just a mess. I had, in all honesty, like a callus developed on my top lip, and it was extremely painful to play. In the past, I probably would have just taken a couple days off. Things would have felt at least relatively better by the end of that, and I could have gotten back to playing. However, this time, even after a little time off, things were still pretty injured. So that caused me to take a hard look at some of the foundations of my playing, particularly this idea of pressure on my lips and how I could alleviate this through shifting how I physically address the instrument. So that's where I'm kind of coming from on this stuff and why I made this choice. Now, if you clicked on this video, you're probably thinking, well, Shawn, how do I do an embouchure change to make playing a little bit more appealing? Unfortunately, I cannot tell you that in a super direct way. Every person watching this would need to do something slightly different. Maybe some slightly different exercises, possibly changing physically things in a different way. There's not a one-size-fits-all way to move through this. Through my own experience, and we're working with students over the last 20 or so years, I have found that no student needs the same thing when they're undertaking this process. So if you encounter anybody that says they've got the magic recipe for a perfect embouchure for you and the changes you need to make, I would be very skeptical. They might have good information, but you got to take that stuff with a grain of salt. So with this, I would really encourage, if you're watching this, to maybe get in touch with a sort of trusted teacher or colleague that can guide you through this process. Now, admittedly, I undertook this myself because I have a long, history of teaching and working with students. So I wanted to see, well, if I took some of these approaches I would do with my students and did them myself, could I find success? But in reality, most of us are pretty bad at evaluating our own faces and our own playing. If things are feeling good, we tend to think we sound good. But if they're feeling bad, we tend to think we sound bad, and vice versa on those, when really probably most of it sounds the same or very similar out front of our horn. So we really need to have objective outside people checking out our playing, both what's coming out of our bell and what's happening with us physically, to get the best feedback about how to possibly fix it. While I cannot give you a set of the guaranteed exercises that are going to fix your embouchure, because in my opinion, it just doesn't work that way. What I can give you a little guidance on, a little perspective on from my experience, are some things that you've got to have the right mindset to undertake this process with. The first thing that you need to keep in mind when you are undertaking an embouchure change is that it is going to suck. It is not going to be fun. It is going to be a process that lasts somewhere between a couple weeks to possibly a couple months or even more. I would say I'm sort of midway, feels like, through the process, and I've been at this for a couple of months now. I've sort of broken everything down, and now I'm kind of building everything back up. A little bit more on that in a second. But if you don't go into the process understanding that it is probably not going to be very fun, you won't make it to the other side. All right, exercise number 1 that I actually did practice when I was going through this process is really easy, straightforward lip slurs. I'm talking about things you might have practiced when you were in middle school. So maybe going from B flat on top of the staff, down to F, back up to B flat, just 2-note lip slurs. Or maybe going the other direction, B flat up to D. When doing this very foundational lip slur, I'm thinking about changing my mouthpiece placement. That was the change that I needed to make. As I mentioned, I put a little too much pressure on my top lip on the right-hand side. So it's more about trying to find balance of the pressure between my top lip and my bottom lip, and maybe getting everything to come a little bit more towards the center, because I do tend to play off to one side. All right, our second point about your mindset that you got to keep right as you're working through these very foundational exercises is that this process of changing your embouchure is not going to be a linear path. You may find that you have some extreme ups and downs as you're in this process. A couple days where you're moving forward, and then you might feel a couple days where it's like, what the heck am I doing? After a couple weeks of trying to change this setting to be a little bit more balanced between the two lips and a little bit more to the center of my sort of embouchure, I found that my old setting no longer felt right, but my new setting also didn't feel good. I was completely in the weeds. This can be really frustrating, especially for somebody like me who still had professional playing obligations to do during this process. However, sometimes when you feel like you are completely lost as a player, that is right where you need to be in order to find the next path forward. This feeling I had of nothing feeling right was actually a cue that I had sort of broken down some of the embouchure habits that were there, and I was actually on track to move forward in a good way, even though in the moment it was incredibly frustrating. All right, exercise number 2 that I actually practiced when I was doing this embouchure change. So I found that once I shifted, I had a really hard time starting notes in a clear way. So in order to work on this and just work on articulation in general in this new sort of setup, I did a lot of single note articulation exercises. I would take major scales that moved through sort of the middle-ish register and literally attack just a single note on the first note of the scale. Take the horn off my face, get a good breath, get the horn back on my face, attack the second note with just a single attack, trying to just have a nice clear start to the note, while every time having to find that new embouchure setting by taking the horn on and off of my face. This also really helped me to connect with whether my air and tongue were actually coordinated, an issue that, in all honesty, is still a work in progress for me. The final element of keeping your head together when you're going through this sometimes frustrating process of an embouchure change is realizing that that's what it is. It's a process. So for me, I'm about maybe 3 months out of this. I can tell you that after about 6 weeks of working on this, I started to notice that I was no longer feeling pain when I was playing. Even when I was playing demanding gigs, that maybe things weren't totally working the way I wanted them to, but I was no longer in pain by the time I got to, maybe the end of the second set or the end of the night, which was really just a revelation for me in many ways. I have not felt like that in years. But now, maybe 3 months into the process, I feel like everything has sort of been reset, if you will. However, I don't know that I have totally instilled the good habits so that it really feels completely natural. That's sort of where I am in the process now, is sort of the breaking down phase is over. Now I need to be in the rebuilding phase. And at the end of that, I probably will find a place where it feels a little more stable, a little more natural. Like I don't feel like I'm constantly sort of falling off the wagon, if I have a strenuous gig or something like that. But this idea that we're always just in that process of resetting every day. I love Joe Alessi talks about this. He talks about every time you come to warm up, you are starting over on the horn. And I think that's been really something key for me to realize. All right, final practical exercise in contrast to all this conceptual stuff. So this is something I'm literally working on right now. This is doing flow studies. Now, I've always been a real like long tone and lip slur sort of warm-up type person. I've never really invested a lot of times in these flow studies. These are things you might find in, for example, the Stamp book or the Chickowitz book, those sort of sources from trumpet playing. But I decided to instill them in my practice, and I'm really, really liking them. I really think they're helping me to get in touch with the good habits that I want to have. So as a flow study implies, we are flowing across all of these notes we're going to be playing. No tongue. You're going to get a combination of some partial changes and some glisses for us as trombone players. If obviously you were a trumpet player or something like that, it would be some natural slurs and then some places where your valves were sort of doing the work. It's all about, can you find a really high degree of evenness and just ease as you're flowing across these. Now, I would add, when you're doing that sort of exercise, or in all honesty, any of these fundamental exercises, I think if you hit a little uneven note, maybe a little note where you chip the entrance or chip a partial change or something like that, don't panic and, sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater. You got to just keep the air flowing, listen for the center of the note, listen for stability, and find it again. You're always going to be encountering places where the tone just has a little bump in it or something like that. And if you get too used to like, oh, I got to stop and fix it, that's not really going to instill a real practical approach to playing. You want to sort of have this all just be as relaxed as possible. You sort of like notice the indiscretion. You let it kind of correct itself by hearing the center of the note, keeping the air flowing. And then hopefully when you move to the next key, like in that example, you can find a little bit more center. So that's the way I've been undertaking this over the last couple months. Hopefully that can give you some insight into maybe some things you need to think about if you are considering doing an embouchure change. Like I said, you are going to have to figure out the individual exercises for yourself, or possibly and hopefully maybe with a teacher. The three big takeaways for me that I have had with this that affect my entire playing. Number one, when you can play without pain, it makes playing so much more enjoyable. This is something that I have not experienced in a very, very long time. The better part of my career, I have been playing with some to maybe even a significant amount of pain in my upper lip. And so to not be playing in pain anymore, it makes playing fun. For example, sometimes when I reach the end of my time that I have to practice, maybe before I start teaching for the day or anything like that, I still want to practice. I never used to feel like that. So if you are someone who feels like you have some pain when you play from a variety of reasons, or you just feel super fatigued, I would really encourage you to consider maybe trying an embouchure change to see if you can help with that. That is definitely an area where I think this can give you some positive results. Thing number two, for me, this has shown me that my air and how I use air was and is still a little bit not happening. And so even though we're talking about embouchure, we can't neglect the air aspect of this. Once I got a little bit of pressure off of my top lip and the lips actually could feel a little more free to vibrate, it really showed me that, man, I was really forcing the air. So really taking a step back, trying to work on relaxed air has been super important for me. And then the final thing, whatever direction you feel like you need to change, whether it's, changing placement or pressure like I did, whether it's more engagement of the embouchure, less engagement of the embouchure, maybe it's more about focusing that airway into a stream, the aperture, whatever it is balance. That is the key. For me, it was all out of whack because I had too much pressure on my top lip. And so that made all the other things a little bit unbalanced, and finding balanced pressure has been the key for me. So maybe if you feel like the embouchure is too firm, you need to find a balanced approach to firmness, not just total relaxation. That's not going to give you any control, but it's all about this sort of middle path on all of these elements that make up our playing to find success. Cool. We'll see you in the woodshed.